Lieutenant Marcus Harper stood in the bustling command center of the Pioneer, his hands resting lightly on the controls as he ran through routine diagnostics. The ship was nearing the outermost edges of the Andromeda Galaxy, and everything had been proceeding according to plan. The crew had settled into a predictable rhythm, monitoring data streams, conducting experiments, and observing distant star systems with little more than curiosity. It was a peaceful assignment, the kind that made Marcus grateful for the calm after the more chaotic missions he had survived in the past. For now, space was quiet, the stars serene and unmoving, but the serenity would not last. The hum of the ship's advanced communication system shifted, suddenly rising in pitch. The soft buzz of the usual static morphed into a distinct melodic sound, a rhythm, as though someone or something was deliberately transmitting information. It was unlike anything Marcus had heard before. He quickly pressed a button on his console, opening up a visual interface that connected him to the ship's central communications relay. A stream of alien symbols scrolled across the screen, followed by a harmonic hum that reverberated in his chest. The transmission was not random, it was structured, intentional. The message itself was a curious blend of mathematical patterns and intricate symbols that Marcus recognized as linguistic data. "Captain," Marcus called, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "You need to see this." Captain Alvar, a seasoned officer with the worn, hard-edged demeanor of someone who had seen the worst space had to offer, moved to Marcus's station. He didn't say a word as he gazed at the display, his brow furrowed in concentration. Alvar's mind worked quickly, assessing the situation. After a few tense moments, he spoke. "This is definitely not a random signal. Prepare to transmit a response. Get the linguists on this immediately." Marcus nodded, his fingers flying over the interface as he initiated a response. Within moments, a team of linguists had been notified and began the process of trying to decipher the alien language. But the more they analyzed it, the more confused they became. It wasn't just a signal. It was an invitation. It took less than an hour before the full translation was completed. "We welcome you. Come, you are safe here." The message was simple. It was an invitation to meet. But there was something strange about it. Something unsettling. The tone wasn't like the cautious, fearful transmissions they had received in the past. No, this was different. It was almost personal. "Captain," Marcus began, his voice now full of questions. "What do you think this means?" Alvar's eyes were narrowed, his jaw tight. "It means we've found something. I don't know what, but we're going to find out." With a curt nod, the captain turned to the rest of the crew and gave the order to prepare the landing party. The mission was shifting. What had once been a routine exploration was now a first contact situation. The Pioneer altered course, the engines humming softly as they pushed toward the coordinates transmitted by the alien race. Hours later, the ship touched down on the surface of the unknown world. The landscape before them was like something out of a dream. Vast fields of golden grass stretching out beneath two faintly glowing suns that hung low in the sky. A cool breeze carried the scent of strange flora, and distant mountains were silhouetted in the hazy light. There was no sign of technology. No sign of civilization. But then, just as the crew had prepared to disembark, a sleek silver craft appeared from above, descending from the sky in a slow, deliberate motion. It hovered gently above the field before landing with a soft thud. The crew gathered at the airlock, their breaths held in anticipation. "Stay sharp," Alvar warned as he led the team down the ramp. This could go in any direction. Marcus, standing among them, felt his heart racing. This was why they were out here. This was the culmination of years of training, of reaching into the unknown. But as he stepped onto the soft golden grass, there was a strange sensation, a sense of awe and trepidation coursing through him. The alien craft's door hissed open. The figure that emerged was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The woman who stepped out was tall, towering, almost, but what struck him most was the way she moved. Her skin was an iridescent lavender, shimmering as though it were made from liquid light. Her eyes, large and oval, glowed faintly with an inner fire, a vibrant luminescence that was both captivating and unsettling. Her robes billowed around her in a fluid motion as though woven from the fabric of the cosmos itself. The fabric was metallic, alive with subtle patterns that seemed to change depending on her movements. She regarded the human standing before her with a quiet intensity. The air around them seemed to crackle with an energy that Marcus couldn't quite explain. The crew remained still, unsure of what to do or say. Marcus, however, felt his mouth go dry. He had prepared himself for this moment for years, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer otherworldly presence of the alien woman before him. Her gaze fell upon Marcus. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Her eyes locked with his, piercing, intelligent, and curious. Marcus wasn't sure why he did it. It wasn't in the protocol, it wasn't something he had rehearsed, but somehow the words slipped out before he could stop them. "You look beautiful today," he said, his voice sounding oddly small in the vast emptiness of the field. There was a long, tense silence. The alien woman didn't smile. She didn't speak. She didn't even move. Instead, her gaze narrowed slightly, her eyes glowing faintly brighter, and the world seemed to pause as if waiting for something to happen. Behind him, Marcus could feel the eyes of his comrades burning into his back, their awkward glances tinged with disbelief. He had been told that first-contact situations were fraught with danger. Diplomatic missteps could lead to anything from confusion to open hostility. But his mind was blank. The words had simply come out, and now he wasn't sure what to do. Finally, the woman's voice broke the silence, smooth and melodic, but carrying a weight of something far deeper than he could comprehend. "Do you find beauty in the way I look, or in the way you expect me to be?" Her words echoed through the air, resonating in his chest like a hum of ancient energy. Marcus blinked, taken aback. He had not expected a question like that. He had been trained to speak with diplomatic caution, to be careful with his words, to ensure they conveyed respect. Yet somehow this alien woman had turned his simple compliment into a profound interrogation. I meant no offense," Marcus stammered, his mind racing for an appropriate response. "I simply wanted to express admiration. Where I come from, it's common to compliment others when they look, well, good." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes flickering with an almost imperceptible curiosity. "Admiration," she repeated. "Is that what you offer? Or is it a reflection of your expectations of what beauty should be?" Marcus swallowed, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He was starting to realize that this was not just a conversation about physical appearance, it was something far deeper. His simple gesture, which he had meant to be kind, was being scrutinized as though it were a matter of life and death. "If I were not to meet your expectations," the alien woman continued, her voice now soft but layered with an almost imperceptible tension, "would I still be beautiful to you?" Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. What could he possibly say to that? I don't know," he managed to say, feeling more vulnerable than he had ever felt in his life. "I only meant to offer a kindness. I'm not sure how else to explain it." Her gaze softened slightly, the intensity of her stare ebbing. Then, without warning, she extended her hand toward him, and the golden grass beneath their feet shimmered and rippled in response, like a wave in an ocean. The air hummed with an odd, otherworldly vibration. Marcus hesitated, unsure of what was happening, but instinctively he reached out and grasped her hand. The moment their hands met, a surge of energy passed between them. It was as though the universe itself had opened up. A flood of visions, sensations, and emotions washed over him. His mind was filled with images, flashes of a great, forgotten empire, of celestial cities that gleamed like diamonds under twin suns, of a civilization that had once been at the height of its power, only to fall into ruin. The alien woman who had introduced herself as Seraphine was one of the last survivors of her people, and now, standing before him, she had unlocked something in him, a deep understanding of her own isolation and grief. Her people had once looked to beauty as a measure of worth, but somewhere along the way they had lost the ability to see each other clearly. They had become obsessed with perfect images, with ideals, and in doing so had lost the essence of their existence. "You see me for what I am," Seraphine's voice echoed in his mind. "Not for what you expect me to be. That is a gift." Marcus, overwhelmed, withdrew his hand slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The world around them seemed to return to normal, but the connection was still there, a bond forged through the simplest of gestures. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know," Marcus said, his voice shaky. Seraphine smiled faintly, her eyes softer now. "Kindness," she murmured, "is the most beautiful thing you could offer. Perhaps now I can learn from you." The silence stretched between them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was filled with understanding, with the potential for something far greater than either of them had anticipated. Marcus had come to this planet expecting to catalog an alien species. Instead, he had discovered something far more profound. He had offered kindness, and in return he had received a window into an ancient, fallen culture that would forever change the course of their mission. As the crew of the Pioneer watched in stunned silence, Marcus realized that beauty, true beauty, had nothing to do with appearances. It was about connection. It was about seeing beyond the surface and into the very soul of another being, and in that moment, Marcus knew his life had changed forever.
The Pioneer had landed, and everything around Lieutenant Marcus Harper seemed surreal. The planet they had descended upon was nothing like the barren, rock-strewn worlds they had cataloged during their journey across the Andromeda galaxy. This world, bathed in the warm glow of two suns, held an atmosphere of quiet grandeur. The golden fields stretched as far as the eye could see, and the faint scent of exotic plants tingled the air. It was a strange tranquility, both beautiful and mysterious. As the crew slowly filed out of the ship and gathered at the landing site, Marcus's heart raced. He had trained for years studying diplomacy, alien cultures, and language, yet nothing could have prepared him for the moment when the door to the alien ship opened and the woman, their first contact, stepped out. She was unlike anything he had imagined. Seraphine's presence was overwhelming. Her tall, elegant form seemed almost ethereal as she emerged from the spacecraft. Her lavender skin shimmered faintly in the light, as if woven from the very fabric of the stars themselves. Her eyes, enormous and mesmerizing, glowed with an inner fire that pulsed gently, and her robes, oh, those robes, were made from a material that Marcus couldn't begin to understand. They moved like liquid metal, shimmering and shifting with her every step. For a moment, no one spoke. The crew stood frozen, the vastness of the moment sinking in. This was first contact. This was history. Marcus could hear the faint hum of the alien woman's voice as she spoke, not in the language of their people, but in a harmonious cadence that seemed to communicate both understanding and mystery. The moment she locked eyes with him, he felt an inexplicable pull, as though she could see straight into the depths of his mind. He couldn't help it. He blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. "You look beautiful today," he said. It wasn't a strategic move, nor was it meant to sound diplomatic. It was an honest, if awkward, comment, an attempt to offer a bit of human warmth in a moment that was anything but ordinary. He wasn't sure why those words escaped his lips. They just did. The silence that followed was excruciating. Seraphine's glowing eyes narrowed, her head tilting slightly to the side, studying him in a way that made Marcus feel both vulnerable and exposed. The alien woman didn't smile. She didn't even acknowledge the comment in the way he had expected. Instead, she asked something far deeper, her voice resonating not only in his ears but in his very bones. "Do you find beauty in the way I look, or in the way you expect me to be?" Marcus stumbled, the weight of her question sinking in. He had thought his words were simply a friendly compliment, a gesture of peace. But in that moment, he realized how little he truly understood of the alien woman standing before him. She wasn't just an extraterrestrial being. She was someone who had lived a history far beyond his own comprehension. Marcus hesitated. "I meant no offense. I only wanted to express admiration, kindness. Where I come from, it's common to offer compliments, to say that someone looks good, that they are, well, beautiful. And if I were not to meet your expectations?" Seraphine's voice was soft now, almost like a whisper. Her gaze remained fixed on him, the intensity of it almost overwhelming. "What then? Would I still be beautiful?" Marcus opened his mouth, but the words eluded him. He hadn't considered this possibility. Hadn't considered the possibility that beauty, the way it was perceived by human eyes, might not exist in the same form on this alien world. What did beauty even mean to her? What had she experienced that made her question something so simple as a compliment? Before he could formulate a response, Seraphine extended her hand toward him. her long fingers hovering just inches from his own. The air between them seemed to pulse with energy, as if something ancient and powerful was awakening. Marcus hesitated, unsure of what this gesture meant, but his instinct told him to take the leap. He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. The instant they made contact, the world around him shifted. A surge of energy rushed through him, faster than his heart could beat, sharper than the air he breathed. Images flooded his mind in a chaotic rush. He saw things he couldn't understand, things that felt both foreign and intimate. The towering structures of a long-lost civilization, cities built on principles of beauty and knowledge, now lying in ruin. A race of beings once revered for their wisdom, now scattered and broken, hiding from their own past. The people of this world had been perfect in their ideals, but they had lost sight of the essence of who they were. The visions were vivid, alive with motion and color, yet they were not just sights, they were emotions too. He felt the sorrow, the confusion, the isolation of these beings, the questions they had asked of themselves, and the yearning for something deeper, more meaningful than the perfect, idealized versions of their past. In the blink of an eye, the flood of images receded. Marcus blinked, his vision returning to the present moment. The golden grass beneath their feet seemed more vibrant now, the light of the twin suns casting long shadows across the land. He withdrew his hand slowly, feeling a new weight in his chest. "I didn't mean to," Marcus began, but the words died in his throat. How could he explain what had just happened? How could he explain the deep sense of connection, the overwhelming flood of history and emotion that had coursed through him? Seraphine seemed to sense his confusion, her glowing eyes softening ever so slightly. "Kindness is the most beautiful thing you could offer," she said quietly. "Perhaps now I can learn from you." Marcus didn't know how to respond. He had thought he was offering a simple gesture of goodwill, but instead he had been shown the raw, unfiltered truth of an ancient race's sorrow, their pain, and their beauty. Seraphine turned her gaze toward the horizon. She extended a hand again, not toward Marcus this time, but toward the landscape that stretched before them. The golden grass shimmered in response to her touch, and the distant mountains seemed to breathe with life. There was power in her movement, power that Marcus didn't fully understand. "There's much to learn," Seraphine said, her voice now tinged with a quiet resolve. "You see us, but we have forgotten how to see ourselves. And you," her eyes returned to Marcus, holding his gaze for a long contemplative moment, "you have shown me something we had lost long ago." Marcus swallowed, trying to process the enormity of the moment. This was no simple first contact. This was a reckoning, a rediscovery of something ancient and vital. Before he could speak again, Seraphine began to walk, her robes billowing around her like a fluid cloud. The crew remained behind, unsure of how to proceed, but Marcus followed. His legs moved almost of their own accord, guided by a force that he couldn't explain. They walked for hours. As they moved across the golden fields, Seraphine explained bits and pieces of her world, fragments of history and culture that had been lost to time. Her people, once advanced in knowledge and technology, had been obsessed with perfection, with the ideal. They had created an empire that spanned the stars, but in their pursuit of beauty, they had lost their way. Their society had crumbled, unable to reconcile their ideals with the flaws that made them human, or, in their case, alien. "We were once a race that believed beauty defined us," Seraphine said, her voice distant as if recalling something from a long time ago. "But beauty is not just in the surface, it is in the soul. We stopped seeing each other for who we truly were, and in doing so, we fell." Marcus couldn't help but feel the weight of her words. They were a reflection of his own world. In some ways, a world that had become obsessed with ideals of perfection, chasing unattainable standards at the cost of understanding the deeper truths of humanity. As they walked, Marcus noticed something else, something he hadn't expected. The fields of golden grass weren't just beautiful, they were alive. The plants seemed to pulse with an energy of their own, responding to Seraphine's presence as though they were connected to her in a way that defied logic. Every step she took seemed to make the world around them more vibrant, more alive. "What is this place?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with awe. "This was once the heart of my people's empire," Seraphine replied, her gaze lingering on the distant horizon. "But it is more than that. It is the essence of who we were. It remembers. And now, it remembers again." Marcus could feel the weight of her words, the power in them. This place, this world, was more than just a planet. It was a reflection of her people's rise and fall, a place where their history had been etched into the very soil. "We will rebuild," Seraphine said, her voice firm now. "We will learn from the mistakes of the past, and we will see each other once more." Marcus felt a deep, resonant understanding of her words, a recognition of the shared experience between their worlds. This was not just a first contact. This was a chance for both of their peoples to learn, to grow, and to rediscover the meaning of true beauty, not in the flawless exterior, but in the soul beneath it. As they continued their walk, the golden grass rippling beneath their feet, Marcus felt a quiet hope stir in his chest. The journey ahead would be long and uncertain, but it would be worth it. They had discovered something far more profound than they had ever expected, and this was just the beginning.
The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the landscape. The winds that had once stirred gently through the golden grass now seemed to carry with them an ancient hum, an energy that resonated deep within the earth, like a whisper of forgotten memories. Lieutenant Marcus Harper walked beside Seraphine, his mind struggling to keep up with the revelation after revelation she shared about her world. It was clear that the planet itself was more than a mere setting. It was intertwined with the very fate of her people. "I cannot help but wonder," Marcus said, his voice a quiet reflection on the enormity of their conversation, "how much of your history you have left behind." Seraphine did not immediately respond. She walked with a grace that was almost otherworldly, her lavender skin shimmering faintly as the light shifted. The metallic fabric of her robes seemed to respond to the environment, changing subtly with her movements, as if her clothing were attuned to the energy of the land itself. In the distance, the faint outline of ancient structures emerged from the undulating fields of grass. Spires of dark stone, overgrown with vines, hinted at the once grand civilization that had lived there. "My people did not leave behind their history willingly," Seraphine said at last, her voice soft but heavy with sorrow. "It was lost to us, by our own hands." Marcus glanced over at her, sensing the weight of her words. The alien woman, despite her ethereal beauty, was burdened with something far deeper than he could fully comprehend. The first contact that had begun so innocuously with a simple compliment now felt like the beginning of something far more profound. "We were an empire," she continued, her eyes lost in the distance. "Our technology was unparalleled. We spread across the stars, creating cities that were more than just buildings. They were reflections of our ideals, of our understanding of beauty, of perfection. We thought we could perfect everything, that beauty would save us." Her voice grew quieter, as though she were speaking more to herself than to Marcus. "But we forgot something important along the way," she said. "We forgot that perfection cannot exist without flaws. We forgot to embrace the imperfections, the differences that make us who we are. In our quest to create perfect harmony, we destroyed the very essence of what made us unique." They stopped in front of one of the ancient structures, a towering monolith that had once served as a palace, its walls now weathered and cracked. Vines curled around the stone, their deep green tendrils reaching up toward the sky. There was a quiet beauty in the decay, Marcus thought. It was as though the planet itself was mourning the loss of its people, of its once great civilization. "This was once the heart of our empire," Seraphine explained, her hand brushing against the ancient stone. "The Council of Beauty ruled here, guiding our people with the idea that beauty and perfection were the highest aspirations of life. We created art, science, and technology, all based on the pursuit of perfection. But as we ascended, we became blind to the truth. In our pursuit of an ideal, we lost our connection to what made us human, what made us alive." Marcus absorbed her words, feeling a sense of grief and wonderment. How did it end? Why did it all fall apart? Seraphine's expression darkened. "It wasn't one moment. It was a slow unraveling. The more we sought perfection, the more we turned against each other. Those who couldn't keep up, those who didn't fit the ideal, were pushed aside, discarded. The art, the science, the technology, they became tools of oppression, not creation. And in the end, the very thing we worshipped became the force that destroyed us." Her voice faltered for a moment, and Marcus noticed her hand trembling ever so slightly against the stone. For a brief moment he saw the true weight of her loss. Not just the loss of a people, but the loss of an entire philosophy, an entire way of being. The pioneer crew, who had been silently observing from a distance, now began to approach. Their eyes were wide with the same sense of awe that Marcus had felt since first stepping onto this planet. They, too, were beginning to understand that this was not simply a scientific discovery, it was something far greater. "I knew you would come," Seraphine said suddenly, her voice taking on a different tone, one of quiet acceptance. She turned to Marcus, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "You are not like us, and yet you are. Your world, your people, are not unlike ours in many ways. You too have sought perfection, and in doing so you have lost touch with what is real." Marcus blinked, his mind spinning. He had expected a conversation about technology, about science, about discovery. But this was something altogether different. "We've made our mistakes. We're still making them," he admitted. "We're still chasing ideals of beauty, of perfection. We're still trying to define ourselves by what we should be rather than what we are." Seraphine nodded slowly, her gaze still steady on him. "Perhaps that is why we are here together. To remind each other that beauty is not in perfection. It is in the flaws, the things we cannot control." Marcus couldn't help but feel that her words had struck a deep chord within him. There was something remarkably humbling about the way she spoke of beauty, not as something to be perfected, but as something to be understood and accepted. Her people had been consumed by the pursuit of an unattainable ideal, and in doing so, they had lost everything they once held dear. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, his voice low with both curiosity and concern. "Is it possible to rebuild? To recover what was lost?" Seraphine turned and began to walk slowly toward the crumbling remains of the once great palace. The crew followed at a respectful distance, their footsteps light on the soft alien soil. "We cannot return to what was," she said, her voice distant as she gazed out across the fields. "What we had is gone, lost to time and our own mistakes. But perhaps that is not such a terrible thing. Perhaps it is time to rebuild something new. Something that does not worship perfection but embraces imperfection, the messiness of life. I can show you how we lived before, but you must also show us how you live now. We need each other." Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. This wasn't just about scientific discovery or first contact. It was about something much deeper. This was a reckoning, a chance for two peoples to learn from one another, to grow together. But he couldn't shake the sense of urgency that had taken root within him. This was not a world that could afford to wait much longer. "Can we help?" he asked, his voice more tentative now. "Can we do something to assist in the rebuilding? Is there a way for us to learn from your people, your history?" Seraphine turned to him, her expression unreadable for a moment. "You have already begun to help. By showing kindness and humility, you have already demonstrated something that we have forgotten. There is hope in you that I cannot deny." She reached into the folds of her robes and pulled out a small, delicate artifact, a piece of shimmering crystal shaped like a star. It caught the light in an otherworldly way, sending tiny flashes of color dancing across the surface of the ancient stones. "This," Seraphine said softly, "is a key. It will open the archives of my people, the knowledge we lost, the knowledge you need to understand what happened here, to help us understand what we can become, is stored within." Marcus reached out to take the artifact, feeling its weight in his hands. It was both fragile and impossibly powerful, as though it carried the entire history of her people within it. "What do you want us to do with it?" Seraphine smiled, though it was bittersweet. "Take it back to your people, share it with them. Let them know that the pursuit of beauty, of perfection, will not save you. But the pursuit of understanding, of connection, might." As the crew stood there, the artifact glowing faintly in Marcus's hands, the truth of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. They were no longer just explorers. They were participants in something far larger than themselves. The universe had given them a chance to learn, to heal, and to grow. But it would take more than just discovery. It would take courage. It would take humility. And above all, it would take time. "Let us begin," Seraphine said softly, her voice carrying a note of hope. And with that, the journey of discovery had only just begun.